Yo, what's going on, guys? And a recent report came out about Kevin Durant. Obviously, we knew that he and his agent were going to work with the Suns to facilitate a trade this offseason. But Shams Charania said that the Suns have already kind of have a short list of teams that are going to be interested in him. We know Minnesota is one of them. We just talked about in a separate video the Knicks. Allegedly, the Rockets are one, and that's crazy how divided the fan base is on that one when it's going to potentially cost them nothing to get him. The Spurs are interested in him. That makes sense. And the Heat. The TLDR on all these trades would be Timberwolves, from my understanding. They would give a package that would be based around Julius Randle. Naz Reid would probably opt into his player option and then be re-signed to an extension. And I'd assume it was originally Dante DiVincenzo when he was struggling, but now I'd assume it'd be Mike Conley because they'd want to keep DiVincenzo. The Timberwolves and the Suns need a point guard. Conley, yeah, he's older, but he's still reliable. For the Spurs, you'd have to assume it'd be a deal around probably like either Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. I think something along those two, and then a bunch of young players like Malachi Branham and Blake Wesley, maybe even Jeremy Sohan or whoever they want to avoid giving up draft picks instead of giving up young guys. And then the Heat, it would be two trades that I've seen floated around. If they can do a 3-team trade where Terry Rozier gets dumped to a team like the Nets and gets bought out, you send Terry Rozier and Andrew Wiggins over there, and Kevin Durant goes to the Heat. Maybe you add Vazi Micic and they throw in Jaime Jaquez, and you figure that out. You get Wiggins and Jaquez, or just Wiggins, and that's one that's possible. You could also see throwing a sign and trade Davion Mitchell right there. Now, the Knicks, I've said it would probably be a deal around OG Anunoby. So, what do you guys think? If you're just a fan of any of those teams, what would you trade for Kevin Durant? Do you think draft capital is even going to be involved? Or would you say no, just probably salary filler that's potentially either a starter, a decent starter, or, somebody on a so-so contract with a young guy to sweeten the deal, like I said, with like the Jaquez and Heat situation. And I think they could use Vazi Micic as a trade, like salary filler, to make a trade work because he has that team option. Because he's really the only other guy. Obviously, Bradley Beal would be the one you want to trade to, but nobody's going to take that. So you just seem that Vazi Micic is the only one that maybe a team like the Heat or the Nuggets or just the Warriors. Obviously, the Warriors aren't trading for Durant because they have Butler, but that would be intrigued because they would probably be able to properly use him. And again, team option. Or you just dump him in the aforementioned theoretical Rozier Nets dump. Now, let's just go in and just talk about, I think really the Miami's the most realistic because he would want to go there. They best be able to utilize the end of his career, maximizing his health, and Bam Adebayo and Khalil Ware would allow him to have his defensive deficiencies be masked because he gets blown off the ball. Yeah, he grabs 6 rebounds, but he's like not the guy he used to be. He's kind of like just an incredibly elite marksman, and just a really good offensive player who's like kind of slow-footed now. No disrespect, I love Kevin Durant, so it makes sense where your starting lineup probably Bam and Kevin Durant, because you're probably not playing him at the 4. At the 3, or rarely. Sometimes they'll run the Twin Towers with Durant at the 3. I just think maybe you do, but There's also the idea, dark horse, that the Heat do move on from Tyler Hero. I doubt it, but it's been floated. I think you keep it. So the idea is Andrew Wiggins, and if it's not Terry Rozier, and I would have said Kyle Anderson before Eric Spoelstra fell in love with him like he should have from the beginning. It could be Duncan Robinson. He picks up the player option, and that brings you to what? I think it actually brings you to exactly $48 million, just over it. And again, I've said full mid-level, I think, is $14 million. And if you do a sign trade, it's technically a cap hit of 7.5, or you can take back 7.5. So I forget how exactly that number would hit them, but you could do a Davion Mitchell sign and trade in there, and he can help you get over the edge, and then a guy like Jaime Jaquez could sweeten it. So Davion Mitchell sign and trade with Duncan Robinson and Jaime Jaquez, just because Jaquez seems like he's going to potentially be used as a trade chip. I think it's, if they have 2 first-round picks, meaning they lose in the play-in, the Heat would probably keep Jaquez because they would use one of those picks. If they'd only have 1 pick, then they would probably use Jaquez because A, they probably don't want to pay him, and B, they like Jovic and Pella Larson more than him. And I wouldn't be surprised if Keyshawn Johnson and somebody. I want Drew Smith to come back, and I hope he does. But, obviously 2 lower body injuries back-to-back years. They're all guys that they like, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're cool moving him. The same thing they like Haywood Highsmith. So then we talked about the Timberwolves. I think the Timberwolves is straightforward, and it depends on how desperate the T-Wolves are there. I think the T-Wolves, if they can just do that deal straight up, because what is it? I think Julius Randle makes 34, I think, this coming year. And we're 30 million, my apology, 30.9. Naz Reid makes 15, so that gets you to 45. And Mike Conley gets you to like 54. So technically, if it is Mike Conley, you would have to, they could also just do a bunch of young guys like Lou Garza, Josh Minot, and Leonard Miller instead, which is like right there. That's 4.4, basically 4.5, and then 6.7, and I think they'd keep Jalen Clark, but 5.7 with Garza, Minot, Miller, and you throw it, that's like 20 million between them and Naz Reid, with Julius Randle's 30, and you just do Kevin Durant, you give him some young bench pieces who are all on expiring deals, and you give him Reed and, Mr. Randall, who's not terrible. 2-time All-NBA, 3rd team. That's not bad. That is also like an option there. We talked about the Knicks, OG Anunoby. The easiest, I think, would be OG Anunoby, Tyler Kolek, Pacom, PJ Tucker, and I feel like I'm missing Ariel Huckporty, older, so they can just have a 7-man rotation of Mitchell Robinson, Josh Hart, Karl-Anthony Towns, Kevin Durant, Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, and Jalen Brunson. That would be insane. Now, I do think the Wizards, if they felt like, or the Thunder and the Boston Celtics are 3 dark horses. The Thunder and the Boston Celtics, Lil Dicky said what I've been saying for weeks now, is that I think the Celtics, if they win back-to-back titles, or if they lose in the championship game and the new ownership doesn't want to have Drew Holiday's contract on the books, and they don't want to be the ones to pay Kristaps Porzingis, but they want to keep the window open for 1 more year or 2 years, they do a deal of Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis for Fozzie Misic and Kevin Durant, like a swap, then the Thunder, it would probably, if they like come up short and maybe they feel like as a result that they didn't have a veteran presence or that they just need another dude, I could see the homecoming like that, like would make everybody happy. It would be like Isaiah Hartenstein, because next year they do have contracts on the books and he makes 28.5 and they're now at 172. So it's not like they have to shed a ton of money, but you would think at that point, Isaiah Hartenstein and Isaiah Joe and probably one of Aaron Wiggins or Kenrich Williams, and then Ousmane Dieng to sweeten it. So in this, I mean, Kenrich Williams really closed out the season well, but Aaron Wiggins is locked up long term, I think, and plus how the contracts will work out. So let's do Wiggins plus Ousmane Dieng, which is right there, like 16.5 or 16.2. My apology. And you throw in Isaiah Hartenstein, which gets you to 44 or 45 million. And he could just right there do, I believe, just that deal for Kevin Durant would work. But if you want to get it to similar money, they could see if Nikola Topic, that would get them to 15. I would just cut the deal right there. Or a Jay Will, the center, gets thrown in there to make 47, something like that. I wouldn't get too much more into the nuances. Makes no sense. I feel like we might be missing. Are we missing a team that from earlier? I think we mentioned everybody. Oh, the Spurs are the only one that, the Rockets and the Spurs are the only two that we didn't talk about, and that's fine. Like, we'll talk about them right now. So the Rockets are an interesting one because they're actually going to have cap space this offseason. I think the best way would be if the Suns say, hey, Fred VanVleet, do accept your player ops or do a sign and trade for Fred VanVleet. And maybe like Jabari Smith gets thrown in there. I think the best is player option picked up, and you promise an extension as soon as he becomes eligible, because I do believe he's eligible once in August or September. I forgot when the window opens. And that's like 44.8. And Jabari Smith would be extension eligible, and you could probably get him at a 15 to $20 million annual rate, sign into like a 4-year, $100 million, same rate to Santi Aldama, maybe a little bit more because he was a high draft pick. But those two together is 57 million. As I mentioned again, you have Fozzie Misic thrown in there, which is 64. And you can maybe ask for Aaron Holiday, and you bring in Aaron Holiday, Mr. Jabari Smith, and Fred VanVleet. You get a point guard, 2 point guards, and a power forward who works out well, or a center, if depending on where you want to play Jabari. Power forward is probably where I would do it. You could switch out Aaron Holiday for Jock Landale because he has no money guaranteed. And if they did this trade like on draft night, they could waive him before the 29th and save $8 million. That's another thing that they could look at, which would really help them. Right there, you basically don't even have to worry. Or you could switch Dylan Brooks. I think there's multiple ways to do it. Fred VanVleet's the easiest way to do the deal because you're only $10 million short. And I'm pretty sure because they'll be at 140, even if they were to pick up the deal, I think they would then be able to eat, I think, the $10 million difference. So I think it could really just be Fred VanVleet and whatever draft capital they want to expense, or a young guy to get the deal done. So the Rockets could get the deal done super easy. So they're the ones who have the easiest thing. That's why I think it's so crazy that people wouldn't want to bring him in when old Costi's Fred VanVleet, which then would allow you to start Amen Thompson at point guard or Reed Shepherd and just go from there. Now, as I said, the Spurs are interesting because it could be Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson just packaged together. That gets you to like $44 million, and I believe they could just eat the $10 million difference. And if they really cared to dump players and not eat that $10 million difference, Malachi Branham 4.9 and Blake Wesley 4.7 gets you to what? That's 9.6 million additional in there. So if you're really worried about it, those two added with Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell, I just think that's 4 players. That's where you're giving up so much and you're at 143. So the ideal situation, in my opinion, which I believe you could do, is Harrison Barnes. But supposedly Harrison Barnes and De'Aaron Fox's spouses are very good friends, and that was part of the reason why Fox wanted to be traded to the Spurs, was because of Mr. Harrison Barnes. So interesting dynamic there, and I doubt that the rise of Steph Castle, would convince the Spurs to say, hey, send De'Aaron Fox and Harrison Barnes, which is $56 million, to the Spurs for Kevin Durant and Vazi Micic and whatever capital draft or young players the Spurs want. I don't think that's something they would do. So the Spurs one's intriguing for me to see, because it either have to involve some sort of combination of Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Harrison Barnes, and then a young guy like a Malachi Branham, which is fine, and Blake Wesley, maybe even Julian Champagnie or Jeremy Sohan in there. So those are the interesting parts about all of that. I don't know. I didn't mean to make this one so long, but yeah, those are my thoughts on all that. And I want to hear your guys'. Do you guys agree with me or do you guys disagree? And like I said, I think we touched on all of them. So, ciao.